short timeline presentation about the book. Coming out of the book, Never Again Alone in English, is the fruit of a beautiful teamwork.
In December 2012, after the release of the book in France, in November 2011, the Faith and Light Secretariat made its first contact with Faith and Light in USA to have the history of Faith and Light translated into English.
Among the 1,500 communities around the world, we count about 630 communities whose members speak or understand English. The translation of this book into English is a very good way to spread the holy history of Faith and Light widely. In February 2013, before contacting the publishing houses, several extracts from the book have been chosen to be translated into English and proofread by Tim and Maria Cecilia.
Also, in February 2013, Pastor Pamela Landis starts looking for publishing houses. The book is refused because it is in French, and the cost to translate would have been over $20,000 US. The prospection continues.
In April 2013, Tim and Maria Cecilia, who have a very long experience of Faith and Light, accept the beautiful mission of translating the book. The adventure can start.
In December 2013, the tremendous work of translation, 312 pages, is finished.
December 2013, the book is sent for proofreading to Maureen O'Reilly, former international coordinator from USA, also here with us this evening, and Judith Lanier, member of Marie-Hélène's Faith and Light community from USA.
April 2014, the long research led by Pastor Pamela Landis bears fruit. The International Board approves and a contract is signed on March 2014 with the Christian publishing house Westbow Press, based in Bloomington, Indiana.
July, for the release of the book, the USA provinces plan to organize in November a few days gathering. Marie-Hélène Mathieu will be invited to give a conference on the topic of Never Again Alone. October 2014, the book is released and available online.
And now the time has come. We are here at the retreat and conference in Washington, D.C. to celebrate together the release of the book, Never Again Alone.
Let us give thanks to the Lord for this beautiful project coming true and for this unique event that we share together tonight.
It has been such a joy for us to translate the book, to bring it to life in English, especially after having heard the story so many times by Marie-Hélène. So many times. And every time we heard Marie-Hélène telling the story, she would add a new detail. A new fact. Oh, you never said that, Marie-Hélène. A new family would pop up, a new friend, a new event. It's been fascinating to hear the story over and over. And as she said, it really was like, listen, all over again. You know, little children, when we write the favorite book and we ask our parents to read again, and the parents are tired to tell the story. The only thing is Marie-Hélène is never tired to tell the story. And so we would sometimes sit around Marie-Hélène. I remember in Edinburgh, I was part of the International Council. Maureen was the international coordinator, and we all sat in the garden around Marie-Hélène and said, now you're going to have a whole hour, not just 5-10 minutes, tell something. Tell us the whole story of Faith and Light. It was beautiful. That was the first time she really sat with the council and spent a lot of time telling us so many details. And since then, she was bugged a lot about we have to write it out. And then, as a couple, we had the privilege to be also in the council when we still had continents. The organization was in continents, and we are members of the International Council. And the last time we met at that type of structure in Faith and Light, Marie-Hélène and Jean were there with us, and we asked them both to tell the story of Faith and Light again. It was a different group, and I was the only one who had been in Edinburgh. What a privilege. In 1990. And then I was there again at the council now with Tim in 2010. I was back there as a couple with Tim. And heard the story all over again, extended the story for the International Council. And what a difference. The same story, but very differently told. The first times we heard lots of facts, lots of fun stuff, lots of little things here, little things there, lots of events. The last time, the same story, but much more about the meaning. What is the meaning we get of this? I'm not a theologian, but I thought of St. John and the other Gospels kind of thing. I don't know if that's a good parallel for you. For me, that's how it sounded like. What is the meaning of all that? And John, Marie-Hélène, they helped us to hear again the story, but the different years. You know, it's 40 years later, not just 10, 20 years later. And so it was a privilege to dive into this book. And I tell you, we've read this book I don't know how many times to get this done. And the book is both the story of the facts and the meaning. It's just a beautiful gift, Marie-Hélène, that you give to all of us. And all of us who will come later on. So, Tina will tell now the practicality of how we did this. That's how we work together. I just forgot to say this. Yes, it's a mix of facts and meaning, but it's a lovely, and as Marie-Hélène said, it's a whole story.
Can I really have it now?
Yes.
I get to tell the boring part. As was pointed out, our work in terms of the book and the translation of the book began very innocently enough with a request to proofread some extracts that had already been translated into English. And we've done this in for Faith and Light documents before, so it was okay. It was just a small little something. Fine. We looked them over, we sent them back. It took about 10 days. No big deal. Well, that was the end of January. By the end of March, the request came, by the way, would it be possible for you to translate this book? Whoa, 350 pages in French. When it comes to translation, we're the odd couple here, especially from French. Maria Cecilia's native language is Portuguese. My native language is English. Never studied French. She did study some French. So this was a very strange Faith and Light kind of thing. Well, if it came out, it's a miracle, of course. So we had to discover a process for doing this. We work together in Faith and Light, but each task or each project we have to find out, okay, who's going to take the lead and how can we do this the best way. And what we discovered was, and it took us, well, yeah, it probably took us a couple months to get into this rhythm. We began with the beginning of the book, which is the preface or the foreword written by Jean Bonnier. And so we translate that and then we sent it off to Jean to review. You know, what do you think? Yeah, are we on track? Are we close? Whatever. And he said, we called him up on the phone and he gave us some very important advice. He said, number one, don't try to duplicate style. Your job is to communicate. Make sure you get the message across. Marie-Hélène has a very, very beautiful style in French. But the style doesn't translate. You have to translate the meaning. So that was something important. The other thing he told us was, after you're done with your translation, make sure that you have someone who's not you review the whole thing. And that's when we asked Maureen O'Reilly, who graciously agreed to. And this isn't something that we could dedicate a lot of time to. We have a life which includes work and family and faith and light and ministry, and so we're not just sitting around looking for things to do. So we had to blend in somehow or another, you know, in a very disciplined kind of way. How can we make this happen? So what we ended up doing is that Maria Cecilia would do a rough translation from French to English. And whenever she would run across a phrase or a word that was unfamiliar, that she didn't recognize, she would just leave that in French in capital letters. And then it was my job to try to figure out, how that fit in, and then to put it into an English that flowed, which meant breaking up sentences and changing the word order, because each language has its own grammar, its own, particular way. Every language has its own idioms, its own figures of speech. And none of that is translatable. So you have to figure out, well, how do we do this? And so that it makes sense, it's clear, and still that you capture the intent, the mood. When there's a moment of tension in the story, you need to get that tension across. When there's a moment of joy, you have to make sure that joy comes across. When there's a moment of sadness or sorrow and people's lives are being touched, you need to get that across somehow in your own language. So that's the challenge of a translation.
And being very, very faithful to oneself.
So I went out and bought a very fat Cassell's French English dictionary and began the work. We also had the copies of the book had been translated in Portugal and Brazil. So we both have some familiarity with Portuguese, Maria Cecilia being Brazilian. And so we would refer to the Brazilian or the Portuguese copy and we were totally lost. What is this? So, like I said, this is kind of a strange odd couple of translation here. And Maureen was always very, very gentle with us when she would send us back her recommendations. She always says, you're in charge. This is what I think. You're in charge. It's up to you to have the final say. Marie-Hélène is a word person. She has a very rich and refined vocabulary, and she enjoys the nuances of language. She writes with a kind of a classical style, linking phrases in a beautiful flow that stretch sentences over several lines. She seamlessly blends memorable stories, literary references, theological insights, and history. since the main purpose of language is to communicate, our first priority as translators is to get the original story across. The message, the information, even though it's in another language. We weren't in the business of trying to create a parallel or a paraphrase word. And the problem with any translation is that it's an impossible task. There's a Latin proverb that says, the translator is a traitor. If you never get it right. So what we ended up doing is that wherever we saw something in the text that might be unfamiliar to people, because people in France would obviously know it, but people in other countries might not, or people who came from a Catholic context might be familiar with this, but maybe other people would not, we would try to put in extra footnotes to help people to follow the text. And as we worked, we came to discover what a gift and a privilege it was to be able to have such an in-depth and intimate knowledge of Marie-Hélène's book. It certainly gave us new insights into the adventure we all share together in Faith and Light, and it deepened our bonds of affection and admiration with Marie-Hélène. And we're very grateful to have been part of this work. Thank you.